Before this night was over, the most respected man in the room would bow to the one person nobody had bothered to see. Derek Coleman stood in the center of North Ridge Martial Arts Academy with the easy confidence of a man who had never been forced to question himself. The white lettering on his black belt caught the overhead lights each time he moved, and every student in the room knew exactly what that belt meant. State champion, featured instructor, the face of the Academy's social media page. Around him, nearly 30 students formed a loose circle on the blue training mats, smiling, whispering, waiting for another display. Derek had already spent the last hour showing off quick combinations and flawless footwork, making sure every movement looked impressive from the cameras held near the wall. Then he noticed Isaiah Brooks. Isaiah was 61, black, quiet, and almost invisible in the way people become invisible when everyone has decided their job is the only thing worth knowing about them. He wore a faded gray work shirt with the Academy logo stitched above the pocket, dark pants, and worn shoes with rubber soles that made almost no sound. He had been cleaning the edge of the mat, pushing a wide mop in slow, even lines, careful not to interrupt the class. Derek watched him for a moment, then smiled as if an idea had just arrived. "Hey, Isaiah," he called. The room softened into silence. Isaiah stopped the mop, but did not look up right away. "You ever wonder what it feels like to wear one of these?" Derek asked, tapping the knot of his belt. A few students laughed. Isaiah lifted his eyes. They were calm, steady, and unreadable. "No," he said. The answer was simple, but something about it bothered Derek. It did not sound embarrassed. It did not sound impressed. It sounded final. Derek glanced toward Ryan Mitchell, who was already raising his phone to record. "Come on," Derek said, stepping closer. "Just for a joke. 1 minute on the mat. You can tell everybody you lasted 60 seconds with a black belt." More laughter moved through the room, though not everyone joined in. Near the back wall, 16-year-old Noah Bennett stared at the floor. "Coach." Brandon Hayes looked up from the equipment table, his expression tightening slightly. Isaiah rested both hands on the mop handle. "I'm here to clean," he said. "Exactly," Derek replied. "So let's clean up your stance first." The students laughed louder this time. Isaiah's face did not change. He looked past Derek toward the Academy's front entrance, where an old framed photograph hung crooked beside the trophy case. The picture showed a group of martial artists from nearly 20 years earlier, all standing behind a younger Michael Hartman. The instructor at the center of the photograph had been faded by sunlight until his face was difficult to recognize. Isaiah studied it for only a second, then looked back at Derek. "Some lessons cost more than they should," he said quietly. Derek tilted his head, amused. "Good thing this one's free." He reached toward a pair of spare gloves and tossed them lightly across the mat. They landed near Isaiah's shoes. The room went still. Isaiah looked down at the gloves, then at Derek's feet, his shoulders, the angle of his hips. For the first time, Coach Brandon stopped breathing normally. He knew that look. He had seen it once before in an old training video locked in Sensei Hartman's office. Isaiah slowly set the mop against the wall. He did not reach for the gloves. He simply stepped onto the edge of the mat, and the laughter disappeared before anyone understood why. Isaiah stood at the edge of the mat without raising his hands, and that unsettled Derek more than any challenge could have. The Academy had grown so quiet that the faint hum of the ceiling lights seemed louder than the breathing of the students. Ryan Mitchell kept his phone aimed at the center of the room, but even he had stopped smiling. Derek glanced around, expecting someone to break the tension with a joke. No one did. Isaiah's shoes rested just beyond the white boundary line, his posture relaxed, his shoulders low, his expression unchanged. He did not look like a man preparing to prove anything. He looked like a man deciding whether the moment deserved his attention. Coach Brandon Hayes stepped away from the equipment table. "Derek," he said, keeping his voice measured. "That is enough." Derek turned toward him with a grin that felt slightly forced. "We are only having fun." Brandon looked at Isaiah, then at the old photograph beside the trophy case. Something in his face suggested that fun was no longer the right word. Noah Bennett noticed it too. He had trained under Brandon for 2 years and had never seen the coach look uncertain. Isaiah lowered his gaze to the spare gloves near his feet. He bent down slowly, picked them up, and placed them on the bench instead of putting them on. "I do not need these," he said. A few students exchanged confused looks. Derek laughed, but the sound landed flat in the silent room. "You planning to win with a mop?" Isaiah glanced toward the wall where he had left it. "I'm not planning to win." That answer drew everyone closer without a single person moving. Derek had built his reputation on confidence, but confidence depended on being understood. Isaiah gave him nothing to read. No anger, no fear, no need for approval. Derek stepped onto the mat and rolled his shoulders as if preparing for another demonstration. He shifted into a polished stance, one he had practiced in mirrors and perfected for competition. Isaiah watched his feet, then his hips, then the way his right shoulder lifted before every movement. Brandon saw the change in Isaiah's eyes and felt a memory return with sudden clarity. Years earlier, while searching through Sensei Michael Hartman's office for tournament records, he had found an old training tape. The picture had been grainy, but the instructor on the screen had moved with the same stillness Isaiah carried now. The man never rushed. He simply waited until the other person revealed what they intended to do. Brandon had watched only a few minutes before Michael entered and shut the tape off. Michael had not explained who the instructor was. He had only said, "Some people teach technique. He taught us what technique was for." Now Brandon understood why Isaiah's first day at the academy had made Michael unusually quiet. Derek raised one hand and gestured for Isaiah to come forward. "Just step into the center." Isaiah did not move. "Why?" he asked. Derek's smile tightened. "Because everyone is waiting." Isaiah looked around the room. Some students seemed entertained. Others looked uncomfortable. Noah stood near the back, one hand pressed lightly against his side from an earlier drill. Isaiah's eyes paused on him. "That is not a reason," Isaiah said. Derek followed his gaze and saw Noah. "Do not worry about him. He is still learning how to stand up for himself." Noah looked away. Isaiah's expression remained calm, but his fingers closed once around the edge of his work shirt. It was the smallest movement anyone had seen from him, yet Brandon recognized it as the first true warning of the night. Derek did not. He stepped closer, still smiling for the camera, and pointed toward the center of the mat. 1 minute. That is all." Isaiah looked at the crooked photograph one more time. Then he stepped fully across the white line. The moment Isaiah crossed the white line, the room seemed to change around him. North Ridge Martial Arts Academy had always been loud during evening sessions, filled with the slap of bare feet against padded flooring, the squeak of gloves, the rise and fall of instructors calling out combinations. Now every sound had faded. Even Ryan lowered his phone slightly, as if he had begun to understand that the scene in front of him was no longer a harmless clip for social media. Derek stayed near the center of the mat, smiling for the students gathered around him, but his eyes kept returning to Isaiah's posture. There was nothing dramatic about it. Isaiah stood with his arms loose at his sides, one foot slightly behind the other, his weight balanced so naturally that he appeared almost motionless. Yet Coach Brandon could see what Derek could not. Isaiah was positioned exactly where every angle favored him. "You can raise your hands," Derek said. "It helps." Isaiah looked at him calmly. "Only when necessary." A few students glanced at one another. Derek's smile disappeared for half a second before returning. He shifted his stance and began circling, making a show of his footwork. Isaiah remained where he was. He did not follow Derek with his head. He followed him with his eyes. Near the back wall, Noah Bennett watched with growing attention. Earlier that evening, Derek had used Noah during a demonstration in front of the advanced class. Noah had been nervous, and each mistake had drawn another comment from Derek. The students had laughed because Derek was popular and because laughter was easier than admitting the lesson had gone too far. Noah tried to laugh too. Isaiah had seen the effort it took. "This is what confidence looks like," Derek announced, speaking to the room rather than to Isaiah. "You stay relaxed. You control the space. You make the other person react." Isaiah's gaze moved briefly toward Noah. "Confidence does not need an audience," he said. The words were quiet, but they reached every corner of the academy. Derek stopped circling. Ryan raised his phone again. Coach Brandon stepped closer to the boundary. Derek, in this. Nothing has started, Derek replied. He spread his hands and looked around the room. I am teaching. Isaiah tilted his head slightly. Then teach the boy you embarrassed. Noah looked up. Derek followed Isaiah's eyes and let out a small laugh. Noah needs to toughen up. No, Isaiah said. He needs a teacher. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Derek had spent years building an image that no one inside Northridge challenged. He had trophies in the front case, photographs on the Academy website, and a line of younger students who copied the way he tied his belt. Isaiah had removed all of that with 5 words. Derek stepped closer, stopping about 3 feet away. You have a lot to say for someone who cleans up after us. Isaiah looked down at the mat beneath their feet. Someone should. Brandon closed his eyes for a moment. He knew Derek well enough to recognize the danger in his expression. Not danger to anyone's safety, but danger to the pride he guarded more fiercely than any championship. Derek, too. Michael Hartman closed the door behind him without speaking, and for several seconds no one seemed certain whether he had heard the final exchange. He wore a dark travel jacket over his academy uniform, and the leather bag in his right hand looked older than most of the students in the room. Derek was the first to recover. His posture changed immediately. His shoulders straightened, his expression softened, and the arrogance that had filled the room disappeared behind the polished smile he reserved for photographs and tournament officials. Sensei Hartman, he said, you are back early. Michael did not answer right away. His eyes moved across the gathered students, then toward Ryan's raised phone, Noah's lowered face, and Coach Brandon standing near the edge of the mat. Finally, his attention settled on Isaiah. No recognition appeared on his face, but something in his breathing changed. Isaiah saw it. Brandon saw it too. Derek did not. We were doing a confidence exercise, Derek explained. Nothing serious. Michael set his training bag beside the door. A confidence exercise with the custodian? Isaiah agreed to help. Isaiah remained silent. Derek glanced at him, waiting for support that never came. The absence of an answer made the room feel smaller. Michael walked toward the mat at an unhurried pace. Northridge had been his life for more than 25 years. He had built the academy from a rented room above a hardware store into one of the most respected martial arts schools in the state. Every trophy in the glass case carried his name somewhere in its history, but he had never allowed the students to call the building his kingdom. Derek had begun treating it that way during Michael's absence. In 4 days, he had moved his championship photograph to the center of the lobby display, changed the advanced class schedule without permission, and turned evening practice into a performance for his online followers. Coach Brandon had noticed each decision. He had also noticed how quickly the younger students learned to praise Derek and how carefully the quieter students learned to stay out of his way. Where is Noah's training partner? Michael asked. Noah looked up, surprised to hear his name. Derek answered before he could speak. Noah was having trouble keeping up, so I gave him extra instruction. Michael looked at the boy's guarded posture. Did you ask for extra instruction? Noah hesitated. Derek turned slightly, and that small movement carried more pressure than any spoken command. Isaiah watched Noah struggle between honesty and fear of disappointing the Academy's champion. I made mistakes, Noah finally said. Michael's expression remained neutral. That was not my question. The room fell silent again. Noah swallowed. No, sir. I did not ask. Derek gave a dismissive laugh. He is sensitive. I was trying to help him get past that. Michael turned toward Derek. Humiliation does not remove fear. It teaches people to hide it. The words landed without volume, yet Derek's face tightened. He had expected approval, or at least the protection of his status. Michael gave him neither. I won the state championship using the system you taught me, Derek said. I know how to prepare students. You know how to win matches, Michael replied. That is not the same thing. Ryan slowly lowered his phone. Several students looked toward the trophy case, where Derek's photograph stood beside champions from earlier years. Until that moment, the image had seemed like proof of authority. Now it looked like a decoration. Derek turned back toward Isaiah, as if the older man had somehow caused a shift in the room. This was his idea, he said. Brandon stepped forward. No, it was not. Derek stared at him. Brandon had corrected him before, but never publicly. You invited him onto the mat, Brandon continued. He refused twice. Michael looked at Isaiah again. The older man stood near the white boundary line, calm and patient, as though he had no interest in winning the argument. Michael's gaze dropped to Isaiah's feet, then to the angle of his shoulders. For one brief moment, the academy disappeared from his eyes, replaced by a memory he had spent years trying not to disturb. A cold training hall, a cracked wooden floor, a voice telling him that balance began before movement. Michael blinked and returned to the present. Isaiah, he said carefully, why did you step onto the mat? Isaiah looked toward Noah. Because the wrong person was being asked to prove himself. Derek's jaw tightened. Then let him prove it. He pointed toward Noah. Let the boy show us what he learned. Isaiah's eyes hardened for the first time. He has already shown enough. Derek smiled, but there was no humor left in it. Then maybe you should show us instead. Michael opened his mouth to stop him, but Isaiah spoke first. Only if the lesson is not about winning. Derek stepped toward the center of the mat. It never is until someone loses. Michael's face went still. Years earlier, he had heard almost the same sentence from another young champion. That young man had been himself. Michael did not look away from Derek. For a moment, the years seemed to fold together inside the academy, placing the young champion in front of the man Michael had once been. He remembered the pride of hearing crowds cheer his name, the certainty that skill excused impatience, and the dangerous belief that every lesson needed a winner. Isaiah had been the first person to challenge that belief. Not with anger, not with embarrassment, with silence. The same silence now resting between Derek and the rest of the room. There will be no match, Michael said. Derek turned toward him. You said martial arts should be tested. Character should be tested, Michael replied. Technique only reveals what is already there. Derek glanced at the students gathered around the mat. He could feel their attention shifting away from him, and that frightened him more than defeat ever had. For years, admiration had been the foundation beneath his confidence. Without it, he did not know where to stand. So that is it, he asked. He questions me in front of everyone, and I am supposed to smile? Isaiah answered before Michael could. You were not questioned. You were observed. Derek laughed once, sharply. By a janitor. Isaiah nodded. Yes. The simplicity of the response unsettled the room again. Derek had expected defense, pride, or some attempt to claim authority. Isaiah offered none of it. He stood there in his faded work shirt with no belt around his waist and no title attached to his name. Yet every person in the academy had begun listening to him. Noah watched from the back wall, his expression changing from embarrassment to something closer to hope. Derek noticed. You think he can teach you? He asked the boy. Noah hesitated then, answered more clearly than before. He already did. Derek's eyes narrowed. After class yesterday, Noah said, he showed me how to stop fighting my own balance. A few students looked toward Isaiah. Brandon did not appear surprised. Michael did. What did he show you? Michael asked. Noah stepped onto the edge of the mat and demonstrated a simple shift of weight, small enough that most people would have overlooked it. Michael did not. His face changed the instant he saw it. The movement belonged to an older system, one built around patience instead of force. He had not seen it taught correctly in almost 2 decades. Who gave you that correction? Michael asked, though he already knew. Noah pointed toward Isaiah. Derek looked from the boy to Michael and felt the room move farther from his control. It is basic footwork, he said. Anyone could have shown him. Michael shook his head. Not that way. He turned toward Isaiah. You told me you had stopped teaching. Isaiah's expression remained calm, but the question reached deeper than anything Derek had said. I stopped calling it teaching, he replied. Michael took one step closer. That does not change what it is. Isaiah looked at Noah. Sometimes a person only needs one sentence at the right moment. And sometimes, Michael said, a teacher hides because he is afraid the world remembers the wrong version of him. No one spoke. Derek looked between them, confused now rather than angry. The conversation had moved into history he did not understand. Ryan lowered his phone completely. Brandon folded his arms and waited. Isaiah's gaze shifted toward the faded photograph beside the trophy case. The world remembers what it wants, he said. That is not your decision, Michael replied. Maybe not. Isaiah turned back toward Derek. But what happens next is... Derek straightened. Then let me show everyone what I know. Isaiah studied him for several seconds. You want them to see your skill? Yes. Why? Derek opened his mouth, but no answer came. Isaiah continued. To help them learn, or to make sure they keep looking at you? The question landed without accusation. That made it harder to escape. Derek looked toward the students. Some met his eyes. Others did not. Noah stood quietly at the boundary, no longer shrinking into the background. Michael watched Derek wrestle with the first honest question anyone had asked him all evening. Finally, Derek said, I earned my place here. Isaiah nodded. Then you should not need a weaker person to prove it. The academy remained silent. Outside, headlights passed across the front windows and disappeared into the night. Derek looked down at the black belt around his waist, then back at Isaiah. For the first time, it seemed possible that the belt had become heavier than he knew how to carry. Derek remained still long enough for everyone to notice. The academy had seen him hesitate during tournaments before, but those pauses had always been strategic, measured in fractions of a second before he changed direction. This was different. There was no opponent in front of him to solve, only a question he had never learned how to answer. He looked toward Ryan, but the phone was no longer raised. He looked toward Coach Brandon, but the coach's expression offered no rescue. He looked toward Michael, expecting the authority of the academy to restore the old order. Michael simply waited. Isaiah was the only person who did not seem to need anything from him. That made Derek feel exposed. You all think I am the problem now, he said. No one responded. The silence did not accuse him, but it gave him nowhere to hide. I have worked harder than anyone in this room, Derek continued. I have won for this academy. I have brought people through those doors. I have given students something to look up to. Isaiah nodded once. That may all be true. Derek frowned, surprised by the agreement. Then why are you standing there acting like none of it matters? Because achievement matters, Isaiah said, but it does not erase responsibility. Derek took a slow breath and turned toward Noah. Did I make you better? Noah looked at Michael, then Brandon, then finally at Derek. You made me afraid to make mistakes. The answer came softly, but it changed the room. Derek's expression tightened. Fear can sharpen people. Sometimes, Michael said, it can also teach them to disappear. Noah lowered his eyes, and Isaiah saw the truth in that movement. He stepped away from the center of the mat and moved closer to the boy, not enough to crowd him, only enough to make it clear that Noah was no longer standing alone. Derek watched the gesture and mistook it for rejection. So now he is your student? He asked. Isaiah looked at him. He is a student. That should have been enough for all of us. Ryan shifted near the wall. Derek, he said carefully, maybe we should stop. Derek turned on him. You were the one who wanted the video. Ryan looked down at his phone. I wanted something people would watch. I did not think about what it would look like to the person in it. The admission seemed to surprise even him. Brandon stepped beside Michael. This is what happens when a room becomes an audience instead of a class. Derek looked around at the students again. They were no longer arranged like spectators waiting for entertainment. They stood in small groups, uncertain, thoughtful, some embarrassed by how easily they had laughed earlier. The change was subtle, but Derek felt it. The attention he had wanted was still there, only now it carried judgment he could not control. Fine, he said. No cameras. No crowd. Just one demonstration. Michael's voice became firmer. You're still trying to turn this into proof. Because everyone suddenly believes he knows more than I do. Derek pointed toward Isaiah. He wears work boots on the mat. He does not teach here. He does not compete. He cleans up after class, and somehow that makes him wise. Isaiah looked down at his shoes, then back at Derek. No, time made me older. Mistakes made me careful. Cleaning only taught me how much people leave behind when they think someone else will handle it. Brandon lowered his gaze, struck by the words. Michael understood them more deeply than anyone. Derek did not. Then show me, he said. Show me what I am missing. Isaiah's expression softened. And for a moment, Derek looked less like an arrogant champion and more like a young man asking the wrong question because he did not know how to ask the right one. "You are missing the difference between being watched and being seen," Isaiah said. Derek's jaw tightened again. "That is not an answer. It is the only answer that matters tonight." Derek stepped closer to the center. "Then I'm asking one last time." Michael moved forward, but Isaiah raised his hand gently. He looked at Noah, then at Ryan, then at every student around the mat. "No recording," he said. Ryan placed his phone face down on the bench. Isaiah turned to Derek. "No applause." The students remained silent. "No winner." Derek stared at him. "Then what is the point?" Isaiah stepped fully into the center of the mat. "To find out who you are when none of those things are left." Derek stood across from Isaiah with his hands lowered, unsure whether the absence of rules made the moment easier or harder. The students formed a quiet circle around them, but no one leaned forward now. There was no excitement in the room, only attention. Michael watched from the edge of the mat with his arms at his sides. Brandon remained beside him. Noah stood near the back, his breathing slow, his eyes fixed on Isaiah. "Begin when you are ready," Michael said. Derek shifted his weight and took one careful step. Isaiah did not move. Derek moved again, testing distance, expecting a reaction. None came. He raised one hand, then lowered it. Isaiah remained still, balanced, patient. The longer the silence lasted, the more Derek felt every habit he had built for an audience becoming useless. There was no applause to chase, no camera to impress, no opponent offering anger he could answer with speed. "Are you going to do anything?" Derek asked. "I am," Isaiah replied. "I'm waiting for you to stop performing." A few students lowered their eyes. Derek exhaled through his nose and stepped closer. He made a quick motion toward Isaiah's shoulder, controlled and harmless, meant only to draw a response. Isaiah shifted less than an inch. The movement was so small that most of the room nearly missed it, yet Derek's hand passed through empty space. He tried again from another angle. Isaiah turned slightly, never rushing, never raising his voice, never making Derek look foolish on purpose. That restraint unsettled Derek more than any display of skill could have. "You knew where I was going?" he said. "You told me," Isaiah answered. "Ow!" "Your body speaks before your pride allows you to listen." Derek looked toward Michael, but Michael's expression gave nothing away. He tried one more time, slower now, concentrating on hiding his intention. Isaiah moved with him, not against him, guiding the space between them until Derek found himself standing exactly where he had started. No impact, no spectacle, just control. The room understood before Derek did. Isaiah was not trying to defeat him. He was showing him how much effort he wasted trying to dominate every moment. Derek's face reddened with frustration. "You are making this look simple." "It is simple," Isaiah said. "That does not make it easy." Derek took a breath and changed his approach. He lowered his hands, relaxed his shoulders, and tried to mirror Isaiah's stillness. For several seconds, neither man moved. Then Derek noticed something he had ignored before. Isaiah's balance did not come from tension. It came from acceptance. He was not preparing to win or afraid to lose. He was simply present. Derek stepped forward again, this time without the sharpness of challenge. Isaiah shifted beside him and lightly touched his forearm, redirecting the motion until Derek turned and faced the students. The gesture was gentle, but it left Derek exposed to every pair of eyes in the room. He saw Noah standing among them. He saw Ryan's phone resting on the bench. He saw the younger students who had copied his confidence and his cruelty without knowing the difference. "Look at them," Isaiah said. Derek did. "What do you see?" "Students," Derek answered. "Try again." Derek swallowed. "People who expected me to teach them." "And what did you teach?" The question entered the room without force. Derek looked at Noah's guarded posture and finally saw the result of his lessons. Not strength, caution, not respect, silence. His shoulders dropped. That being weak was shameful, he said. Noah looked up. Isaiah stepped back, giving Derek the space he had demanded all evening and never known how to use. "Was that what your teacher taught you?" Isaiah asked. Derek glanced at Michael. No, Michael's voice was quiet. It was not. Derek looked down at the black belt around his waist. For the first time, he did not touch it with pride. Then I changed the lesson, he said. Isaiah nodded. Yes. Derek lifted his eyes. Can be changed back? Isaiah did not answer immediately. He turned toward Noah. That depends on the person who is asked to carry the cost. Derek followed his gaze. The entire academy seemed to wait with him. He stepped away from Isaiah and faced Noah directly. His voice lost the polished confidence everyone knew. I made you feel small so I could feel important, he said. That was not teaching. It was fear wearing a black belt. Noah remained still. Derek swallowed and continued. I am sorry. The words were simple, but they were the first honest thing he had offered the room all night. Then Michael moved onto the mat. He looked at Isaiah for a long moment, and recognition finally overcame restraint. The leather training bag slipped from his hand and settled softly against the floor. Michael brought his feet together, lowered his head, and bowed deeply. Master Brooks, he said, I should have done this the moment you walked through my door. No one in the academy moved. Michael remained bowed before Isaiah, and the silence that followed carried more weight than any trophy in the building. Derek stared at the scene as if the floor beneath him had shifted. The man he had treated like part of the furniture was not merely skilled. He was the person Michael Hartman, founder of North Ridge, respected enough to greet as a teacher. Isaiah did not smile. He did not raise his chin or let the moment become a victory. He stepped forward and placed one hand lightly on Michael's shoulder. Stand up, he said. Michael did, but his eyes remained lowered for another second. I should have recognized you sooner. You did, Isaiah replied. You just hoped I wanted to remain unseen. Michael looked toward the students. This academy exists because of him. A murmur moved through the room, but Michael lifted one hand and the sound faded. Years before North Ridge opened, before any of these trophies, before I understood what discipline actually meant, Isaiah Brooks taught me in a small training hall outside Baltimore. The roof leaked. The heat failed every winter. We trained on a floor that was older than most of us. He taught footwork, balance, timing, and restraint. More than that, he taught that skill without responsibility was only another form of pride. Derek looked down. Every sentence seemed to place his behavior beside a standard he had never considered. Michael walked toward the faded photograph beside the trophy case and lifted it carefully from the wall. He carried it back to the mat and held it beneath the brighter lights. The instructor at the center was younger, broader in the shoulders, but the eyes were unmistakable. Isaiah stood behind a row of students, one hand resting on Michael's shoulder. Noah moved closer. That is you, he said. Isaiah nodded once. Ryan picked up his phone, then stopped and left it on the bench. The moment did not belong online. Why did you leave? Brandon asked. The question was respectful, but it opened something the room could feel. Isaiah looked at the photograph for a long time. Because I forgot my own lesson, he said. Michael's expression tightened. Isaiah continued before anyone could interrupt. There was a tournament. One of my students was young, talented, and desperate to prove he deserved to be there. I saw the warning signs. I saw that he needed rest. I also saw the championship within reach. His voice remained even, but the calm now carried regret. I told myself I was teaching courage. In truth, I was protecting my reputation through someone else's effort. Derek slowly raised his eyes. Isaiah was no longer speaking only about the past. The student never blamed me, Isaiah said. That made it worse. He trusted me, and I used that trust to chase a result. Michael stepped closer. You spent years helping him recover. Help after harm does not erase the choice that caused it. Isaiah looked around the academy, taking in the students, the belts, the photographs, and the polished floor he had cleaned each morning before anyone arrived. I left because I no longer trusted myself to stand in front of a class. Noah looked at him. But you helped me. Isaiah's face softened. One sentence is easier than accepting a title. Michael shook his head. You were never only a title. Isaiah turned toward him. Neither are you. The words reached Derek as clearly as if they had been spoken directly to him. Michael faced the room. I built North Ridge from what Master Brooks taught me, but I made a mistake. I protected the Academy's reputation more carefully than its culture. I celebrated championships. I posted victories. I allowed admiration to become authority. His gaze settled on Derek. That failure belongs to me too. Derek looked stunned. He had expected punishment, perhaps removal from the advanced class, but not shared responsibility. Isaiah stepped between them, not as a judge, but as a teacher returning to a place he had once abandoned. Blame is useful only if it leads somewhere, he said. Otherwise, is pride looking backward? He turned to Derek. You asked whether the lesson could be changed. Derek nodded. It can, Isaiah said, but not by pretending tonight never happened. He looked toward Noah, and not without listening to the people who paid for it. Noah met Derek's eyes. This time, Derek did not look away. Michael returned the photograph to the wall, but he placed it in the center of the trophy display, directly above the image of Derek holding his state championship medal. The message was clear. Victory had a place. It was simply not the highest one. The Academy stayed open long after the final class should have ended. No one rushed to leave. The students gathered the equipment in silence, placing pads on shelves and folding towels with a care that had been missing earlier. Derek stood beside Noah near the edge of the mat, unsure how to begin again after apologizing. Noah made the first move. You can help me with the balance drill tomorrow, he said. Derek looked at him, surprised. Only if you want me to. Noah nodded. Edo. But not like before. Derek accepted the condition without argument. Not like before. Ryan walked over and held out his phone. The recording from earlier was still open on the screen. I can delete it, he said. Derek watched the frozen image of Isaiah, standing in work clothes while the room laughed around him. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he pressed the delete button himself. Some things should not become entertainment, he said. Ryan nodded and slipped the phone into his pocket. Michael moved through the room, turning off lights one row at a time, until only the lamps above the main mat remained. The trophies along the front wall lost their shine in the dimness, while the old photograph above them seemed clearer than before. Isaiah had returned to the mop bucket. He wrung out the cloth, set it against the floor, and began cleaning the marks left by the evening session. Derek noticed and walked toward him. You do not have to do that, he said. Isaiah continued pushing the mop in a straight line. It is still my job. Derek reached for the handle. Isaiah let him take it. For the first time since joining Northridge, Derek began cleaning the mat after everyone else had finished using it. The work was simple, repetitive, and impossible to perform well while rushing. Isaiah watched him miss a corner near the wall. You skipped a section, he said. Derek looked back, saw the dull streak, and corrected it without complaint. Michael smiled faintly from across the room. There may be hope for him, he said. Isaiah glanced toward him. Hope was never the problem. Patience was. Brandon approached with Noah beside him. The early class starts at 6 tomorrow, Brandon said. Noah asked whether he could come in before school. Isaiah looked at the boy. Why? Noah thought carefully before answering. Because I want to learn without being afraid of getting it wrong. Isaiah studied him for a moment, then nodded. 5 in the morning. Noah blinked. 5. Balance arrives before excuses wake up. A small smile passed through the room. It was the first laughter of the night that did not leave anyone feeling smaller. Michael stepped closer. You're coming back to teach. Isaiah shook his head. I said I would meet one student. That is how teaching starts, Michael replied. Isaiah looked toward the old photograph, then at Derek cleaning the last section of mat, then at Noah waiting with a hope he was trying not to show. The Academy no longer felt like a monument to what Isaiah had lost. It felt like a place where one mistake did not have to become a lifetime sentence. One morning, Isaiah said. Michael smiled. Of course. Derek finished the floor and returned the mop. What happens to the state tournament? He asked. Michael looked at him. You will not represent Northridge this year. Derek lowered his eyes, but he did not protest. Understood. Isaiah studied his face. What will you do instead? Derek looked toward Noah. Help the students who are not ready to compete. Michael nodded. Then perhaps you will learn more this year than you would have learned by winning. The last students collected their bags and moved toward the door. Noah paused before leaving and bowed to Isaiah. This time, Isaiah returned the gesture. Derek watched, then bowed as well, not because the room expected it, but because he finally understood what it meant. By 5 o'clock the next morning, the sky above North Ridge was still dark. Noah arrived, carrying his training shoes. Derek was already inside, sweeping the entryway. Michael stood near the office with 2 cups of coffee. Isaiah unlocked the